Okay, this should be another episode of By the Numbers League of Legends edition. And like all episodes, I don't know what that sound was. I heard like a xylophone being played through a synthesizer there. I'll imagine everyone on stream didn't hear that sound. Like all episodes, this is sponsored by Alphadraft. That sounded like the mothership was calling me back there, Monty. Like I was about to suddenly realize that life is actually like a video game like the Matrix, and it would blur a little bit, and then I'd be out of the Matrix, and they'd be like, whoa, what the fuck is going on then? They were like, that couldn't obviously be your life, could it? Like you live eSports journalist, you sat in a coat making 6 Skrilla, all thanks to a fantasy eSports service. I mean, it was in the name, right? It was only well written. It's fantasy. But actually, this is real life, Monty. It's not the Matrix. In fact, even continually referencing the Matrix may be copyright infringement. This is an advertisement. But I won't be the one getting sued because I am but a loyal servant to the throne of Alphadraft. So what do you think of Alphadraft?
I think it's fantastic. I also think your mothership reference is quite apt, considering that sometimes I don't believe you're quite a human being. So you being recalled back to the home world to help your people would be actually a pretty plausible scenario.
Yeah. I mean, see, that's obviously because in human society, humans use whatever cultural context they have to interpret the world, whatever metaphors they have. So you just said, like, I was an alien, you know, and I'm being called back to the home world. Obviously, if we'd been around 2,000 years earlier, you would think I was like Jesus and that I'd actually come to this earth to fulfill a message. And eventually, much like the Lord, I would be called back to heaven where I would serve as my own son and myself on a throne for all eternity. And if you were very good, Monty, one day you would get to join me.
I really hope that is not in my future. I would have gotten the more you built the pyramids route as opposed to that you had constructed the great edifices of human culture and understanding, and that now you were leaving us in a better state than you were before.
See, it would be a very sad ending to life if you did die. You went to heaven. I mean, as if there's a heaven anywhere, but okay. I'm back in the Matrix of Christianity there. You went to heaven, and it actually turned out I was God all along. And I inserted myself like a character, like Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings or something, into the narrative. But like a low-level character, obviously, not just like I'm not Kanye West. But well, in many ways, I'm the Kanye West of esports. But we'll get into that now. The commercial's already got very, very long at this point, Monty. So anyway, Alphadraft, it's a fantasy esports service. See, everyone watching, listen to that, all of that shit. If it was a normal commercial, your ear would tune it out. You couldn't listen. You couldn't stop listening. In fact, sadly enough about this show, that's probably the most interesting part. Now let's talk about some League of Legends stats. So we will start in everyone's favorite region, North America. Now in North America, we have. Let's see what the first game is. Actually, maybe we should start with Europe. I think since we
should definitely start with Europe.
Yes, since that's obviously the one that's on tomorrow. Right. So in Europe, the first game is going to be Elements versus Origin. Now, here's what's interesting about this one, Monty, is all that shit about, well, you know, Origin, they always get it together by the end. Like, that doesn't really seem to work after you've lost this many games. Like, at this point in time, is it unreasonable to say Elements could be Origin?
I think the reality of this situation is that Elements and Origin are probably pretty evenly matched at this stage. So, no, I don't think it is. I mean, Origin's issues in terms of their everything, I would say. You know, that said, in the last meetup, Elements did lose to Origin. So there's that angle to it, too. But in the last couple of weeks, Elements has gone like actually 1-5. So I'd still give Origin the edge here, just because they've gone 4-2 in the last 3 weeks of competition. I mean, Elements started out relatively strong, but they've been slipping a little bit ever since then.
Okay, and so obviously one of the narratives of the whole season has been that no matter what happens actually in the Origin games, it's basically just all on the back of Sven. So has that changed if you're going to pick an Origin player here?
I mean, I think that, yes, he has been definitely like the major backbone of the team and the player that has stepped up the most. And as we discussed last week, he actually does have a very high number of points when Origin wins. So I think that he's probably the highest priority pick from Origin if you're going to actually pick up their players. And I do think that this will probably be an Origin win. just because of the current state of the teams and which direction they're kind of heading right now. We talked last week about Ica being a good pickup if you think Elements is going to win, but it's still just, yeah, I think you definitely, Ica and Spraddle were good pickups for their relative positions. So I think maybe you go with those if you think there's going to be some sort of upset. Mr. Rawls also is the highest point total on his team, but otherwise I think Sven is probably whom you're going to want to go with here. Power of Evil is kind of a wash, actually. He's still down at like 22 points in a win, so that's not really the strongest recommendation.
So Roccat play against Splice, and Roccat haven't won a game since week 1. But Splice themselves, I mean, they're not exactly that impressive. So can Roccat steal a win here? Will this be a Splice win?
Oh man, this is so hard to tell. Splice has split 3 of their 5 weeks, and Roccat has just been going 0-2, like you noticed, ever since their first win in week number 1. So they're really struggling right now. So I think Splice should take this, and the guy to go with is Senkux for sure. If you want to actually pick up a player who's going to pick up points. His point total while winning has decreased somewhat, but it's still in like the 29 range. So he's going to be probably some pretty good value should Splice come out on top of this one.
And obviously fairly cheap to play with.
And taking a look right now, as far as these mid laners go, yeah, Senkux is actually very reasonably priced at 7,600 this week. So there's that opportunity too. I mean, Betsy is the same price as him, but I would say they're likely to win this. So Senkux may be kind of the go-to guy right here.
Okay, and then we have Unicorns of Love versus Giants. So basically the real question is, do you take Unicorns of Love players? Do they get a lot of fantasy points?
Yes, and that's we discussed this last week, but Vizicachi has been having a surprisingly good season for a top laner, so his point total is pretty darn high for that position. And yeah, I think that Vizicachi definitely like worth going after right here. Even Joko has been doing pretty well for a jungler at like 23 points. So Unicorns of Love players, I think, are going to be some pretty nice value this week. As long as you can get them. They're still relatively expensive due to the fact that they should beat Giants. Fox also is a really, really good player for fantasy. You look at Hylissang and Steelback. I mean, all the Unicorns of Love players are great point total players. I mean, this is a team that's been doing really well in fantasy this year and has been reliably winning. So any of these guys, you really can't go wrong. Like Fox is going to be good for you. Steelback is actually pretty cheap this week. Down there at like 8,100, so he's not the most expensive. Like Forgiven is, even though H2K is a tougher match against Vitality, and Emperor is expensive, even though he has a tougher match against Fnatic.
So then we have G2 play Fnatic, and obviously Fnatic, the wrinkle is they have a player that they've already just introduced. Can they beat G2?
I don't really think so. I think that they were still showing some synergy issues, and yes, their new support is decent, but not fantastically. We just haven't seen enough. There's not enough details. That said, like he did pick up quite a few points in the first week of competition. What's his idea is Klaj. I can't even say his name.
I assume it's like Klaj back or something.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of that name or make of his play just yet. I mean, Fnatic, they went 1-1. I mean, they beat Elements, lost to Unicorns of Love. The support player did put up some fairly decent points. It's Klybike, I guess, is the way you pronounce it. I don't know. I don't want to recommend him yet because even though he did do well in their win, in their loss, so in their win he put up 28 points, in their loss he put up 6. So he's averaging about 17 right now. I think Fnatic probably won't win this game, so I wouldn't go so far as to recommend him, especially when we're trying to look at the other side of this matchup, which is Gamers 2, which, again, we've seen those really big statistical point totals for, and that in particular, you pretty much always want to go for these G2 players. I mean, Trick is still doing super well in the jungle, one of the highest junglers. Emperor is doing decently at the AD carry. Kika's doing decently in the top lane. So I would tend to lean in that direction. And Perks is still the highest player in the second highest behind Adra, but Adra is probably not going to win his match. So this week, out of all the players you could get, he's probably going to be pretty decent there. So I would say Perks should be a lock. He's going to be the most expensive mid laner, but not by a whole lot, and that should be pretty good.
And actually, for Trick, the interesting thing for Fantasy is if you saw the article Crepo just published, which was showing like the gold income that players had versus their average on G2, the spike is actually on Trick, not like Perks is like above the average, but Trick has like a massive spike in how much gold he makes compared to the league average. And so the point there is actually in this matchup, two of the highest ones was Spirit and Trick. But the difference is, yeah, they both are just going to farm like fuck. But Spirit then doesn't really do anything with that. Like he's been very poor.
No, Trick dives.
Yanks. Yeah, so here's the key thing. Trick's going to get loads of gold. He's going to get loads of kills. And as a result, it's potentially going to be very good for Fantasy.
Yeah, I think Trick is just a great pickup in general. He's been doing super well this season. His point total average is very high for a jungler. Yes, he's going to be the most expensive jungler you can buy, so it only works if you can sort of fit him into this position. But considering that G2 versus Fnatic is likely a G2 victory and how well Trick has been doing, I think he's a good pickup.
So a very interesting game to finish today, well, the play day that we're on, is Vitality versus H2K. And obviously, here's the key thing, H2K have Ryu back. So what do you think that does to this matchup?
I think it should make it even more favored in terms of H2K, but Vitality has proven to be a pretty resilient team overall. I just, like, the problem with Vitality, again, and we talked about this in previous shows, is that even when they win, their players don't get a lot of fantasy points. So they're one of those teams that's pretty good, but isn't reliable from a fantasy point perspective, right? Like Nuke Duck is pretty low. The highest point total player when they win is Cabashard on their team, and he's only at 23. So even if you think Vitality is going to win here, it's probably not exactly worth your money to go for some of these players just because they just don't produce points even in wins. But if you can go for H2K, like H2K, you have I suppose like a sort of similar situation that we've seen in that they don't get too many points when they win either. Yonkos is actually one of the higher point totals from their team. Sorry, my phone is going off. Apologies. And it's Odoamne and Yonkos that are the players that probably should be picked up from a fantasy point total perspective. Even Forgiven, who's done very well this season in terms of his KDA, he doesn't pick up as many points as other players because H2K is sort of efficient in closing these games. So Yonkos and Odoamne are probably your two go-to guys here.
So in light of that, being as this is one of the harder games to pick anyway, who will win the match, do you think that you just stay away from Vitality H2K? Like maybe go with, like G2 seem like the obvious big points and better chance of winning.
Yeah, they're expensive though, right? That's the rub. Is that
G2 Unicorns of Love seem like the locks, right?
Yeah, Unicorns of Love I think is like a really likely pickup. And Splice too, honestly. I mean, we talked about them, but if Splice wins, Senkux usually gets a lot of points. So his value as a mid laner is going to be pretty damn high, especially consider how cheap he is.
Well, in that case, maybe making a team out of Unicorns of Love and Splice. You could probably get a lot of these players in price-wise.
Yeah, Trick too, definitely good.
Okay. So on day 2, we have Giants versus Elements. Do you think Giants, I mean, in theory, are they ever going to win games? Like, is there anything about them as a team that's actually redeemable?
I mean, they did win their first game last week. But it was a victory over Roccat, who's similarly placed at 1-9 in the standings. I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that they're going to be able to take out other teams, but Elements again has been sliding. I think there is the possibility for an upset. And again, the statistical data in their wins is very low, but if that were to happen, and if we were to see some sort of transition like that in the fate of Giants, Adra does, just like last year. Last year, Adra was getting a lot of these fantasy points in the Giants' wins and those unlikely occasions. Ex-Pepe also, Pepinero, he is a huge fantasy point total getter in their one win, but again, a very small sample size. So given the actual state of those particular teams, I think that we could see perhaps a giant upset there, but I'd still rather go for elements on that play day. And just like last week, we talked about players like Ica who do tend to have higher point totals on this elements team, and also Mr. Rales doing well. So even though elements has been on the slide and Giants has had a slight uptick with their first win of the season, I still think like elements is probably going to win here, and you can take players like Mr. Rales, like Ica, and maybe have some success.
So this next one is a really interesting one from an analytical point of view, because I'm really interested to see who you think will win. So Unicorns of Love play Vitality.
Yeah, I don't think I have a very good read on this game. And the first time these teams met this season, it was a Unicorns of Love win. So you can take that into consideration. But Vitality, they've been doing about the same as Unicorns of Love in the past few weeks. So I think this one is going to be extremely hard to call. Generally speaking, you would want to go more for the UOL players if you think they're going to win. Vitality still, again, very low in terms of those point totals. Cabashard, the sort of one you want to look towards too on Vitality if you think they're going to be victorious. But I don't know if I would actually pick up either of these players because I'm not confident necessarily in a victory.
Do you actually know any of the concept behind how they price the players? Like, do they price purely on the stats, or do they price a bit like if you're making a gambling line? Do they price based on how often people pick those players? Do you have any idea of how the formula's done?
I don't know. Obviously, it's based a lot around the what we're talking about here, which is that who is likely to win the matchup, and then what are the average points when winning. Yeah. But I don't know if they incorporate any of those other metrics.
I should actually ask them that sometimes. So I know that information, because this is a good example of a match, right? Where if on day one Vitality beats H2K, people are going to be super hyped about Vitality, and you could actually get mad value from UL if that in any way is factored into it. If it's not, okay, fair enough. But that's how I'm thinking. Because the problem I see with these two teams is, to me, they're like the opposites, which is on paper, Vitality feel like they should be better than they are, but they're a bit underwhelming sometimes. Yeah. Whereas UOL, I look on paper, and I'm like, well, there's no way they should be a top team. And somehow they do it every time in the server. So I feel like they're kind of opposites in that way.
And to their credit, like what's so interesting about Unicorns of Love is they transformed themselves from last year being a team that was very uncoordinated into this year being a team that has significantly better macro than a lot of the other teams in Europe, and also players that used to struggle. I would say even Fox, when he was on that #1 SK team, my criticism of him was he had a really hard time team fighting or translating leads that he got in lane from Svenskeren into a win in the late game. But he looks like a much improved player this year.
I mean, it's obvious to me what's going on with Unicorns of Love, Monty. It's that, here's the thing. Think about Unicorns of Love, and like, when anyone leaves Unicorns of Love, their career just goes to shit at that point in time. So, like, you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, though, Kikis' career's going well. No, he had to change to top lane and become a pure tank player. He can't even be a jungler anymore. He can't even do the Chaos style anymore. Power of Evil looked like he was the best player. He left. Now he's just a mediocre player. Joining Unicorns of Love is a kind of Faustian pact that you will get wins. You'll never be respected for them because you don't deserve them. You'll get wins in some way no one understands, but it costs you the soul of a player. Your soul as a player.
Kikis is doing really well in the top lane with G2. I mean,
well, that's why. Here's the thing: he had his own way to get around it, because he was like, "Jokes on you! I have no soul. Look at me." And then so he double bluffed the devil. He tricked the devil, and so he never lost his soul. So congrats to Kikis, you win. You went to the crossroads at night, yeah, and you turns out you'd already sold your soul to Satan before you went to the crossroads. So well played, my friend.
Did he get a golden mouse and keyboard?
Basically, what Kikis did was much like during that recession where people took like a lot of bad debt and rolled it up and then sold it as like AAA quality investments. And like there's nothing of value there anyway, but you got the maximum value out of it. So basically investing into Kikis, much like the American economy, investing into people who couldn't actually pay back their debts, screwed over the people investing the money. But he got the money. He got that cash money. So that's why Unicorns of Love, I mean, they bring in Fox. He was trash on SK. Suddenly he's doing super well. Hillesang will never leave that team because he knows that like his time on this mortal coil is done once he leaves. So he's smart. He's sticking around. And even Diamond Frogs got revitalized briefly, but then he so many times he'd sold his soul in Gambit, coming back over and over again, playing with shit players. So this time they only let him have like a week, and then that's all it lasted. Actually, his Faustian bargain didn't even strike 12, and he had to leave the ball. My metaphors are all over the place. And that became incredibly point. Yeah. So anyway, the point there is, if you think Unicorns Love will win, pick their players. If not, probably just avoid this match. Because the next...
Yeah, I would avoid this match.
The next match is H2K Origin.
I think with Rhea returning, H2K really has a strong possibility here. I'm still really reluctant to count out Origin because we know how good they can be, and Power of Evil really should be an upgrade for this team, so it's weird to see them struggling to the degree that they are. And we talked about the H2K still remains in that same place, actually, this season, where... they started out with a lot higher point totals than they ended up getting. So, I have to go back to the Yonkos and Otoamne recommendations for players if you think H2K is going to win.
Yep. Here's the thing, Monty. I've got the analogy for you for Origin. No one's come up with this yet, mate. It's fresh off the presses. Origin is this season's Elements because you've got this young star player who loses out to Origin, doesn't get to Worlds, Power of Evil. So much like young Reckless, he goes, I'll join the team that beat me, that team that's better than me. He joins them. On paper, it looks like they've upgraded, they've got the super tip, and it all goes to shit. There we go. They're the new Elements. That's the worst thing anyone's ever said about Origin.
They're busy firing their coaches again.
Exactly. So. See? Yeah, they also have
how many coaches have they been through now? Some would say they'd never been coached. Some people within the team, actually, believe it or not. But interesting how that works, isn't it?
I like that line that Leduc said, just because the way it was phrased wasn't like he was trying to grandstand, but you could tell this is really the way Origin players think, where he said something like, if Riot didn't require them to have a coach, they just wouldn't have one. So they literally have one for the cameras, Monty. Their coach is literally for the cameras. Finally, it's like life really is stranger than fiction. The memes actually become real eventually, Monty.
It's interesting that Amazing isn't coming out and, saying that about their coach, considering he was on that TSM roster when I was being accused of doing similar things. So the ethics are really standing strong right here.
Yep. Well, So in the next matchup, we have Splice versus Fnatic. So here's the thing. The new Fnatic has looked a bit shaky. So the question is, could they get upset here? Because I'm going to go ahead and guess that whenever this gets priced up, the Splice players will surely be like a bargain if they could win the match. But will they really? Yeah. Should Fnatic beat them?
There's the chance of that upset. Senkux is there. He is great value when they win. But I don't think it's going to happen. And so it's difficult to actually recommend those picks. From the Fnatic end of things, you kind of want to lean towards Febiven here, but Febiven and Spirit actually are doing okay when it comes to those points, those fantasy points. But as a whole, Fnatic is a pretty middling team when it comes to points, even in their victories. So I'd say maybe take Febiven or Spirit, but there's probably better matchups to pick on this play day. Overall, notably probably Elements is probably a pretty strong pick, and G2 also over Roccat, considering, again, we go back to the whole trick thing that makes them a pretty powerful team, trick and perks. So I think you could probably pick up better value. Even though the G2 players will, again, be expensive, I think that they're probably worth it.
Of the two, which one would be... like, bearing in mind Elements, I'm assuming they'll be reasonably expensive as well, so they're playing Giants who just don't win. Which of the two is the one that's better to actually overall pick, do you think? Elements, Giants, or G2 Roccat?
I'd say Elements, Giants, probably just because the Elements players are likely to be cheaper since there's more of an upset potential there. But G2 is a great way to round out your roster and make sure that you can pick up a few points more or less guaranteed.
Since I forgot to ask this before, for day one and day two, who should the team pick be? I mean, day one, I'm guessing Unicorns of Love?
Day
one, rather, Unicorns of Love, because they play Giants?
Yeah, I think Unicorns of Love is going to be a good pickup. Elements, when they win, actually doesn't close the game very efficiently, so they're on the higher end of team points in victory. That's definitely something to consider.
For day two, G2.
Yeah, G2, they're one of the more efficient closing teams. H2K is actually generally a bad pick because they close games out too quickly. So UOL, just speaking in generally in Europe, UOL is probably one of the better picks as a team that you can go for.
Okay. So, right, in theory, Unicorn. In theory, well, we'll do Korea now actually, because in theory that's the one that starts like soon. So we'll just do that, and then we'll do NA after that. So for LCK, let me just go to the page here. The first matchup is going to be, I mean, obviously there was yesterday, so the next matchup is SKT versus Longju. Now, first of all, I mean, we've mentioned this every time, but the problem with Longju is no one actually knows which of the lines they will bring out. Now,
Yeah.
Because it's best of three, do you get the sense that every game they are going to give each one of the first two games? Like, we'll line up the first game.
I'm trying to get back to the lobby right now for Alphadraft. Give me just a second, so I can see the player prices.
Is that information known though? Like, because it's a best of three, in worst case scenario, as long as you win one of the first two games, you can't be done. Is the plan actually to keep using those two different lineups for Longju? Is this known?
I would assume. Well, it's not known, but just given the way that they've been switching back and forth, it does. I think there's no telling as to who is actually going to be playing. And against SK Telecom, I don't think that they're likely to win this match either. It doesn't really matter which roster they use based on SKT's performance last week. So, like, it's tough. It's tough to I don't know if I would recommend Longju in any circumstance, just because of the way that things have been going for them recently. They have looked better, especially with Crash starting to show up, but they have some very good games that we've seen from them, and then they also have done things like lose to CJ. So it's a bit of a toss up. I think they may change their players in the middle of the match, but I think this is going to be a 2-0 for SK Telecom. So picking up the Longju players may not be really in your best interests as a fantasy player.
What about the SK Telecom players then?
Those guys have been doing better when it comes to fantasy. We talked about that. Even though I lost picking them to you, Faker and Bang remain two of the higher point total players in the 29 to 28 points per game. So they've been doing really well. Faker has now surpassed Bang, actually, as they've de-emphasized him in their compositions as of late, and put more emphasis on Faker. So I think those guys are probably one you want to go for. Notably, you don't want to get SK Telecom as a team because, again, they're too efficient at closing. So you don't get a whole lot of value from the actual team play. You want to go for the players. Bengi also, Duke has been doing better, though. And so Duke is a player that's been getting close to 26 points, but given his performance last week when we saw him play against KT, it is going to be a 2-game series. The SKT players are likely to be pretty expensive. I mean, they're not as expensive. They're probably in like third place because Longju is a bit of a stronger team. So Duke is probably I picked Duke as more of a sleeper pick because it finally looks like he's integrating well with the rest of the team. And considering his opponents are Flame and Expression, I think he has a really big chance to get a lot of points today.
So this match, next one, has shit show written all over it, which is EM Fire plays Africa Freaks. Problem is, though, is it a shit match in as much as one just might 2-0 the other but not even get fantasy points? Like, will this be a 3-game series?
This one is really weird. EM Fire has been slowly looking better, and the Africa Freaks, I mean, these teams are approximately, I mean, they're both 1-6 in best of threes. But Africa Freaks has won more individual games. They're 5-12 as opposed to like 3-13. So it should be, well, it's 3-12 actually, but in or 3-13 rather. It should be, it's 3-12, excuse me. So 2 more games over to the Freaks.
And they did win a game off Rocks.
I really want to believe in Africa, and when we talk about them from a fantasy point perspective, Songyun has had a very impressive season so far. You don't go for Iksu, go for Songyun or Lyra. Even Mickey has been a little bit lackluster, so I would go for those guys. If the Freaks win, they usually do it with Songyun having a big game this year, and he can really break out. So even in a 3-game series, I'd say that Songyun is some pretty nice value, and probably won't be overly expensive as a player. If there's a chance of an upset, which I don't really think that there is, even if we see EM Fire winning, they're not a team that puts up a lot of points. Seoul is your best bet for points on EM Fire. Seoul and Edge. They're doing pretty well in the upper 20s. I just take Songyun. That's about it.
Okay. Then we have KT versus CJ. Now, as much as CJ's had problems, first of all, like they're a team that just got a new jungler, I think it was, right? Did they get Daydream back?
They did get Daydream back. But Daydream is not eligible for play until the second round robin. So we conclude this round robin next week, and then Daydream and, most excitingly, BDD should be ready to play starting in the second round robin. So CJ could be getting better, and CJ, they did actually relatively well when we saw them play against Samsung last night. And the thing to remember about CJ is that Kramer is a fantasy point god. Like, this guy is just ridiculous when it comes to fantasy play, and he's the thing that's really been carrying this team through. So you really want to take a look at his statistics, because he's the monster on CJ right now. He has the highest point total when winning in the entire Korean scene at nearly 37 points. So CJ here, this guy is really the ticket to victory for CJ Entis. And if there's going to be anybody that can get CJ this win against KT, it's going to be him. He may, even if they can pick up a game against KT, which hasn't been doing so hot recently, may be able to put up more points than some other players. He may be able to put up more points in a loss than some other players do in a win. Mad Life 2 has been doing particularly well this season. Let me take a look at his points real quick, because he's a very interesting case. Gets a bunch of assists, has a very high kill contribution, and yeah, for a support, he's getting over 25 a game on a team that hasn't been doing so well overall. So I still think this is going to be a KT win, in spite of their recent form and their loss to Jin Air yesterday. KT could drop a game here, and they haven't looked like they've had the most diversity. Someday as a player, Someday and Arrow on KT have been doing extremely well. Fly, not so much. So Score also for a jungler has over 28 points a game. So those guys could have a big night, especially since CJ, I think, can steal a game here from KT and send this to a 3-game series.
Okay, and then Jin Air plays Rocks Tigers. So
I mean, the Rocks players are going to be super expensive, but Jin Air has actually been upping their early game, and they actually have, they're third in the league in terms of goal differential at 15 minutes. They just have issues closing. Kuzan, I think, has been getting better and better as the season progresses. So even though he has a relatively low point total when winning now, he might be a bit of a sleeper pick. But I mean, obviously, the Ku Tigers likely to win this one. From that perspective, you want to take Peanut or Kuro, actually. They're going to be probably the most valuable players that you could pick up. Prey and Smev haven't been putting up the biggest point lines, and neither is Gorilla. So it's really Kuro and Peanut.
Plus, in this particular matchup, Trace has been doing quite well overall, so you would imagine he's not just going to get completely wrecked by Smeb 1v1.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's relatively fair to say. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Trace is probably not going to get wrecked by Smeb 1v1. If you're looking for a possible upset, Jin Air, when it comes to the team itself, is really quite good because of how long their average game time is. They're up at like 43 minutes before yesterday's game. I haven't checked up on it today at this point, but they usually get Baron, and it takes them 1 to 2 Barons, like a million dragons to close out the game. So Jin Air, just as a team, has a lot of value for the actual points that you can get. Let me just take a look and see if I can find the actual statistic for you guys. Yeah, 20 points a game as a team, so that's pretty damn good.
And then on the last day, SK Telecom play our Freaker Freaks.
SKT all the way.
Do you think they might BM and put Scout in for a game, though?
You never know. I don't think so, because SKT's been trying to find their footing again, and they suffered that loss to Jin Air early in the season and have struggled with their substitutes when they played Blank Scout. So I don't think so. I think they're just trying to close out with a better record. They really want to climb the standings at the moment, so I don't think they're going to be fooling around with substitute players.
Okay. And then Spenu versus Samsung. Presumably you are favouring Samsung in this match.
Yeah,
I mean, half one, fuck all.
Yeah, and Samsung's coming off of victories over CJ and Jin Air. Like, they're looking like a pretty decent upper middle team, and Spenu has been really doing pretty badly. So
presumably Wraith from Samsung is a good pick?
Wraith has been having a very good season due to his high KDAs. Crown is also improving over time to be a sort of top-tier fantasy pick, and we really saw him go off yesterday on that LeBlanc. So the AD carries, Core JJ's been putting up more points if he's in, but you never know. Wraith's been dropping a little bit, but still at 22.5. He's okay-ish for the support. Samsung as a team is another team that plays long games, and therefore is a good pick just as your team selection.
Okay, right, let's go over to NA now. So, over in NA, we start things off with Energy versus Dignitas. Two teams which, amazingly, aren't now a million miles apart, because NRG, they've cooled off a little bit, right?
Yeah, they have. And, I mean, there have been rumors that I've seen from the Daily Dot that they might be trying to replace Moon or something like that, so they may make some roster adjustments. I'm not sure if that's going to happen this week or if it will even happen at all. I just know the rumors that I've seen from these articles.
Is Dignitas good enough to actually take advantage of that, though?
Probably not, is the answer to that. Probably not. I think that even with the issues on Energy, which, they haven't been that severe, I still think you start taking some Energy players. GBM is a really good fantasy pick at over 31 points. So he should probably be your go-to guy. I mean, in general, Energy, with the exception of a couple games, haven't been closing too well. Impact is also above 35 points in an Energy win, so he's one of the highest point total players. Energy is just a big point team. I mean, they don't close efficiently. They tend to get a lot of kills. Alltech, GBM, Impact, all huge point total players.
So Immortals play Renegades. So the question is, are Immortals players good fantasy points players?
Yeah, they always have been. We discussed this in previous weeks. Obviously, Reignover has been having a really, really good season. Wild Turtle for fantasy points is great. So those are the guys you want to go for here. I think that should be a pretty one-sided game, I'm sad to say.
Okay, and here's a good one. TSM C9, because on the one hand, TSM has a better record, but if you actually look, TSM hasn't beaten that many good teams. They've just trashed all the bottom teams, basically. On the other hand...
CLG. They beat CLG very convincingly this last week, so they may finally be getting it together and getting that kind of synergy that they've been looking for with this particular roster. So don't pick Hanser. Hanser actually doesn't do that well when it comes to points and TSM wins. Bjergsen, he's pretty good. Double Lift is pretty high up there, both in the upper 20s. As a team, TSM doesn't do well around objectives, so don't take them as an entire unit. It's really just Bjergsen and Double Lift that you want to go for on TSM if you think they're going to win. But, Thorin, I kind of agree with you that Cloud9 is probably I would pick them for this match because they've shown more consistency recently.
And I mean, you just look at them. It's no longer like a meme. When they have high in the game, they're just a better team. They turn
Yes,
fights
but
around.
don't pick high.
Sure.
Don't pick high. He doesn't do well. Sneaky and Jensen are the go-to. Do not pick balls. He actually only gets less than 17 points on average in a Cloud9 win. He has been a total non-factor in this team.
The thing about this matchup as well is, under normal circumstances, if you told me a team's head coach had been fired and no replacement was hired, I'd say, oh, well, maybe this is a chance to steal again. Here's the key thing. That head coach was explicitly not someone who had anything to do with in-game shit. His job was motivate you, give you the speeches. And apparently that's why he was fired, because that wasn't working. So don't worry about it. Business as usual. So there'll be no change there. Though. He won't be given a speech that didn't work. So don't worry about it, guys. See the way I always find a bright side to everything, Monty?
You are the true optimist. That's how I think about you.
Something about the dark times for TSM. I find a way to find light within that, you know? That's what I try to do. So, yeah, I actually think that C9 can shock and upset that one there.
Yeah, I think they have a good shot. I mean, they've been based on the strength of their macro game as well as good performances from Jensen. So I think that there could be some good value there because probably TSM is going to come in at a higher price point. Let's just check real quick.
Yeah, all the C9 players, TSM players.
Yeah, I'm taking a look right now. So I think that's actually a really good chance for an upset.
I mean, Sneaky's very reasonably priced.
Yeah, and he's the highest point total player. So you go down there, maybe they get that upset win.
Okay.
I don't even know if I would call it an upset.
I think they're just similarly matched teams. Like TSM obviously has more skill. C9 seem to have a better actual team approach to the game. I think it's a hard one to call, but like we're saying, if the C9 players are cheaper, it's worth a gamble.
It does make it a very intriguing matchup, though.
So CLG play Tip, and obviously CLG don't have an amazing record, but they've been pretty decent in their wins.
Yeah, I'd say they're another team that doesn't have that standout individual play, but does have very strong shot calling and a good sense of game management. I think they should easily take a win over Tip here. I mean, they're still 6-4 in the standings. I think that they're looking pretty decent overall. So, just I'd say go ahead and take them. And Stixay and Huhi have been surprising performers for that CLG team this season. Xmithy not doing so well from a fantasy point perspective. CLG really isn't a barn burner when it comes to picking up the fantasy points. Darshan also, we think of him as like a top lane carry, but even in their wins, he's putting up less than 20 points a game. It's really Huhi and Stixay that are the ones that have the big stat lines.
So here's the interesting matchup. Liquid plays Echo Fox, and obviously Echo Fox have their real players again now, and Liquid has surprisingly had a number of wins, and they've had some games even they've lost where they look decent. The question is, with the new Echo Fox, can they actually win? Because if you actually look at the players, Froggen had some crazy games. Yeah, Froggen had a crazy set of games, and he's actually the second cheapest mid laner in this matchup.
Yeah, it's certainly a small sample size, but considering they upset Energy last week, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to take down Liquid as well.
Because the problem is the Liquid players are fairly expensive.
Yeah, well, they're expected to win. It makes sense because of the season so far that Fox has been having. But if we don't again, small sample size for these players, and it is coming off of 2 wins. Froggen over 30 points a game, KFO at 23. Now that they have this new roster, what are we going to see with these guys? I'm not exactly sure, but Froggen he's been doing well. So there's a chance at an upset here, but purely from the fantasy point perspective. Like, you look at Liquid, and Dardoch actually is approximately the same in terms of fantasy points with Froggen. So, he's been doing really well. Piglet's been doing well. Phoenix, all these guys are above 30 points a game. So Liquid is one of the best fantasy teams overall in either LCS.
They're terrible closing games that way. Like, the games last forever.
They're getting better, though. They're getting better.
Right. So on that one, day one, what do you think the best matchup is to play? See, I feel like Liquid Echo Fox could be good
You could
because there's so much
definitely
unknown factor on the Echo
the
side.
upset. The upset is definitely there. Energy Dignitas, I think, also has a high probability of getting a lot of points for the energy players.
And then for Team Immortals,
Yeah, but that game could be really fast, right? So
okay. What
it
about
may not have.
what is C9 like as an actual team when they win? What is the team like if you pick it?
Let me look. Not very good. Don't pick them as a team.
Well, how about Liquid as a team then? If you think they're going to win, do they get a shitload of towers and dragons and all that good stuff?
Yes, typically they do. Echo Fox is actually decent as a team, also, if you think they're going to pull off that upset. But again, it's so hard to tell with them. Yeah, Liquid is definitely way above C9.
Okay, so the first game of day 2 is Renegade CLG.
I think you take CLG here again, going with Stixay and Huhi, probably your best bet when it comes to fantasy.
And Dignitas play TSM. Now, presumably, TSM is going to win this match.
Yeah, and also TSM has those big point total carries with Bjergsen and Double Lift. Again, don't pick Answer. Don't do it. Don't pick Svenskeren. They're not great for fantasy, but Double Lift, definitely. So this is a chance for him to really rake in the points. They have been looking more coordinated as a team, but previously when they would win games, they were looking highly disjointed.
So I think this next one is a really hard match to know who will win. It's Energy versus Cloud9.
I'd take Cloud9, just given what we know about what's going on with Energy right now and the fact that they've dropped off a little bit as the season has gone on. They started out 3-1 and went 0-2 in their last week, losing to CLG and Echo Fox. So I don't think this is a game they can win. I just think the coordination from C9 is going to be too much for them. Jensen, again, the carry you really want to go with.
Then we have Tip versus Echo Fox, which obviously, again, because Echo Fox is newer, it's hard to know who's the favorite in this matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Echo Fox. I think now that they have their whole roster together, they just have stronger players pretty much across the board. So I'd take a look at them and say, well, might as well go ahead and pick up Froggen right now. He probably won't be that expensive just because their record doesn't justify them to be that much of a favorites, even though I think they are. Mash Me also is up there for fantasy points, as is Proxen. Or I'm sorry, that would be Tip. I meant if Tip wins, sure. Mash Me and Proxen are going to be more valuable when it comes to those fantasy points. But Echo Fox, I mean, Froggen has been what this team has been all about, really, ever since they came back.
Liquid versus Immortals. Is it possible Liquid, with their Neo Chaos style, could somehow at least make this a good game, a long game, a fun game? Or will they be crushed?
I think that with what we've seen from Liquid and Immortals so far, I don't really think that Liquid has much of a chance here. Sure, Dardoch has been doing well, but it's all relative, right? And I think that Immortals have been looking so strong, and you also have to consider the matchup, especially in the jungle. How has Liquid been winning? It's mostly been off of the strength of Dardoch sort of setting up at the plays for the team and carrying them, and that's just not going to be possible because Reignover is definitely the best jungle in North America right now, and he's been having a really, really good season. So I don't see him out jungling somebody with that level of experience. So I think Liquid's main strength are kind of countered by what Immortals is even better at from Reignover. So Reignover here, I think, probably going to do pretty great things.
So team of day 2, probably Echo Fox then?
It could be a closer matchup, but I think Echo Fox is a bit of a sleeper, and I do think that Froggen's going to have probably a breakout day. Even Cloud9, I think, against Energy could be good.
because I have to figure, especially if you want to like put more money on your players, Echo Fox is a team. There's no way they're going to be really expensive, I think. So it'll probably be a decent pickup there that point, because instead you'll have stuff like Immortals. They'll be the ones that'll be the highest ones. So maybe if you need to save the $200 to spend somewhere else, I think that's not a bad pickup.
Yeah, for sure.
And what was the best matchup overall for this day, did we say? Energy Cloud9?
That one could be a long one. That one could be a bloody one. TSM Dig, I think, is likely to be pretty good when it comes to points too. I don't know. There are a lot of ones in this day that could be good pickups.
Wait a second.
What are we waiting
me
for?
That's dead. It's always me, isn't it?
You're dead.
It's always me that's dead. I wonder if I'm still even being transmitted. Am I back? Yeah, it's always me that's dead. Okay, I'm back alive now.
Okay. Like Lazarus, you have risen from the internet grave.
Well, I mean, I was Jesus before, I'm Lazarus now.
You were touched by the god of Alphadraft.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, Monty, it's the end of the show now. I'm quite tired. But you know what, Monty? Much like when I decide when to go to bed, when I play fancy esports, I always do it by the numbers, because there's a clock face by the numbers.